Teach us to pray, teach us to pray. Teach us to pray, teach us to pray. Teach us to pray, teach us to pray for your kingdom. Teach us to pray, teach us to pray. Teach us to pray, teach us to pray. Teach us to pray, teach us to pray for your kingdom.
Well, okay, family. Thanks for hanging out. We are back again, and we're going to continue our reading of Flavius Josephus. And as always, what we do, federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, and video discs under certain circumstances without the authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use and is allowed for the purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, parody, which doesn't infringe on the copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107. And also, we have to make sure that we keep our heads down and our hands up. Men ought always to pray, speaking to themselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. We ought always to pray, talking to our Father. This is how we get closer. I know I need to do a lot more, as I find myself out here in this world and buffeted against by various different things, just rather than reacting, just go ahead and pray about it. Hallelujah. And keeping our heads in these scriptures, studying like the Bereans. Man, look, they threw everything up against the wall and against the scriptures to see if it would stand up and hold water. If it didn't, they cast it down and cast it out. So we need to be like the Bereans, always trying to make sure that we keep our head in these scriptures. It's tomorrow's newspaper today. This is how we know what's going on and what's going to happen in regards with us and our enemies. So also, I want to say, hey, how you guys doing? Man, look. I just came back in from feeding Mama. I had a very busy day. Yesterday I was smoking turkey. No, I do not do Thanksgiving. I don't participate at all. We have a power outage that's supposed to be coming again. And so I reached up in the freezer and I defrosted that turkey and had been defrosting it for a couple of days since I knew about the power outage supposed to be coming Wednesday and Thursday. I said, well, let me get this turkey out. I put a Cajun rub on it. Threw it off in the smoker last night along with some other meats that we had and getting those ready because, when the power outage hits, I can keep that. Once it's cooked, I can keep that stuff cold. I can eat on it for a few days. And that way I won't have to worry about, having to run out of food and having food wasted. So, again, this is the reason why we do the GoFundMe, because we do need the generator. We do need to be able to still provide these smoothies and things for Mama. And have a way to keep them cold. So with that generator, I'll be able to run my blender and I'll be able to run my small refrigerator that I still have from college. And that's all I really need. That little generator will run my laptop and I can stay informed. I'll be able to watch the news online and I can plug my router into it. And because the router, I'm on a telephone line for my internet, so that won't go down at all. But the electricity will. So as long as I can power my router, then I'll still be able to communicate with the outside world. So anyway, we're going to continue looking into Flavius Josephus, and that's the main thing that we're in here for. But I want to show you guys again why we're studying this, why we're looking at this, because this is Jerusalem in Tel Arad. This is the Southern Kingdom's temple. And the surrounding area was the city. I've showed you the pictures before of the surrounding area. But that is the temple up on the hill. And this is what this whole thing that we're talking about is about. That while they were having this issue with the Romans at the gate, these individuals inside the city had barricaded. Well, they haven't done it yet, but they're barricading themselves inside the temple. So they've run them out of the other parts of the city, and they've gone up on the hill now, and they're up here in the temple, and they're about to barricade themselves in. And that's where we're about to take off to as we read this right here in Flavius Josephus. Okay, so that's where we are, and I wanted to bring you up to speed on that. And so, actually, we left off. We are in book 4, chapter 3. We did chapter 3 is a long chapter, so we're going to break it up into pieces. So this is going to be chapter 3, part 2. Okay, and we're going to read some of this, and then we'll just continue on, and we'll pick it up again at another time also, and make sure that we can move along and go ahead and knock this thing out as we start to understand. So they have ran themselves up into the city, and they are starting to have this disagreement among themselves. And so we're in verse 6 of chapter 3. Now the people were come to that degree of meanness and fear, and these robbers to that degree of madness, that these took upon them to appoint high priests. So when they had disannulled the succession according to those families out of which the high priest used to be made, they ordained certain unknown and ignoble persons for that office, for they might have their assistance in their wicked undertakings. Okay, for such as obtained this highest of all honors without any desert, they didn't deserve it, were forced to comply with those that bestowed it upon them. They also set the principal men at variance with one another by several sorts of contrivances and tricks, gained the opportunity of doing what they pleased by the mutual quarrels of those who might have obstructed their measures. Now, again, they're causing the people in the city to fight amongst themselves, and they're causing the city leaders to fight amongst themselves. Some people want to have peace with the Romans, and some people want to go to war. So what they're doing is they're stirring this up in the middle to keep themselves out of it. Because if I can keep people fighting, they won't be looking at me while I'm stirring up this madness. And these guys have come into the city and stirred up this madness because they're running from the Romans. Remember, this is John and his crew that are running from the Romans, okay? So now they also set the principal men at variance one with another, by several sorts of contrivances and tricks, and gain the opportunity of doing what they please by the mutual quarrels of those who might have obstructed their measures, till at length, when they were satiated with the unjust actions they had done towards men, they transferred their continuous behavior to God himself and came into the sanctuary with polluted feet. Now they're up in the temple. Okay, now they're up in the temple, right, up on the mountain. I just showed you the picture of that. And now the multitude were going to rise against them already, for Ananus, the ancientest of the high priests, persuaded them to it. And he was a very prudent man, and had perhaps saved the city if he could but have escaped the hands of those that plotted against him. Those men made the temple of God a stronghold for them, a place whither they might resort in order to avoid the troubles they feared from the people. The sanctuary was now become a refuge, a shop of tyranny. Okay, so now they're up in the temple. See, this is what I was saying. They're up in the temple. Right? Okay, so they had also mixed. All right, so now, so this is what I'm saying. They're up in the temple now, and they're up on the mount. And let me bring that back, because this is what we want to lay into. All right, so they've run out of the city. Now they're up here, and they're holding out up here, and this is where the fight is coming to. They're, up in the temple. Now, Ananus is a high priest. He does not want to fight up here in the temple. He does not want to have any of this going on up here in the temple, but he almost doesn't have a choice, because these guys have run up in the temple. They're up in here now. Okay, this is the close-up shot. They're up in here now. Now, of course, this is all torn down. We know that this is all torn down, but they're up in here now, and he doesn't want to have to fight up in there. But this is what he's looking at. They have come out of the city, which is in the lower left-hand corner. You see all those little yellow dots down there? This is the city down in here, okay? And the temple is up on that mount, and different people live in different places around, but the major city of Jerusalem is down in that left-hand corner. See that down there? This is where they stirred up all the trouble, and as they started to fight against them, they backed them up. They went up the hill and backed up into the temple so they could use it as a stronghold, as a fort, okay? And that's what they were doing, trying to hold out from Ananus and his crew, because they know that they've stirred up so much trouble, the people are coming after them now. Okay, and this is just another view so you can see how the city is laid out. You can see where the city is down on the left there. Okay, and of course you would have other people out in some of these other areas, but that is the city with the temple up on the mount. This is Jebus. from the Jebusites. That David took this and made this Jerusalem and his fort and made it his stronghold. This became Mount Zion. This was the city of David. This is Jerusalem. They're all the same place. Okay, there is no different. The other Jerusalem that you go, the tourist trap, this is not it. This is the real one, not the fake one. This is the real one, not the tourist trap. So when you go to Israel, they take you to the tourist trap and tell you this is where we believed Jesus walked. This is where we believe the Via Dolorosa is. This is where we believe. They tell you all those things they believe, but this is the city that I think it was the Assyrians buried it, or the Romans. I have to go back and look at that again. I forget who buried it, but someone buried it for us not to be able to find it. Okay. And when Joshua Mariel was sent on a mission to go and locate it, when his feet touched the ground and he started walking the land, the Father started using the natural elements to expose it. And when he first saw, when he got there, and it was completely covered at the time, but what he saw was these towers. They were sticking out. He just saw edges. He just saw the very edges of them sticking out. And they went up there and they saw with this stone. They realized it was ancient stone and it was thick walls and not just little walls sticking out. Just it was ancient stone. And they were thick walls, and that's when they started digging and exposed this, and that's how the city was found again. But it started uncovering itself, little bit by little bit in the rains over the years as he kept looking in the area trying to identify where the city of David was and where this temple was, and the Father started exposing it using new elements to uncover it. And as it was uncovered enough, they realized what they were looking at. They started digging, and lo and behold, boom, boom, here we go. We've got the temple now. So this is where they were holed up at. This is where they're holding out, and this is the whole issue of what we're reading right now is right here, and it's Flavius Josephus. And it's the story of what happened when John and his crew ran from Gamala and Galilee into Jerusalem, stirred up all the factions because the Romans were coming and they were talking all this madness to Titus, and now he's got to face his enemies inside the city, and the Romans are coming. Okay, so they also mixed jesting among the miseries they introduced, which was more intolerable than what they did. For in order to try what surprise the people would be under and how far their own power extended, they undertook to dispose of the high priesthood by casting lots for it. Whereas, as we have said already, it was to descend by succession in a family. That's how the high priest came. It went from one high priest to the next high priest. Only the Levitical side of if you were from the tribe of Levi, you were getting the high priesthood going in, the Aaronic priesthood going in. It was by family. It wasn't by casting lots. But this is what they're doing right now. They disposed the families and they started casting lots. So whereas, as we've said already, it was to descend by succession in a family, the pretense they made for this strange attempt was an ancient practice. Casting lots is an ancient practice. While they said that of old it was determined by lot. But in truth, it was no better than a dissolution of an undeniable law and a cunning contrivance to seize upon the government derived from those that presume to appoint governors as they themselves please. Hereupon they sent, this is in 8, hereupon they sent for one of the pontifical tribes, which is called Eniakim, and cast lots of it which should be the high priest. By fortune the lot fell as to demonstrate their iniquity for the plainest manner. Okay, let me read that again. Right? Hereupon they sent for one of the pontifical tribes, which is called Eniakim, and cast lots which of it should be the high priest. By fortune the lot so fell as to demonstrate their iniquity after the plainest manner, for it fell upon one whose name was Phinehas, or Phaneas, the son of Samuel of the village of Aptha. He was a man not only unworthy of the high priesthood, but that did not well know what the high priesthood was. Such a mere rustic was he. He was a country boy. He had no idea what the high priesthood was about. Yet did they hail this man without his own consent out of the country, Like I said, he was a country boy. He wasn't in the city. He was a country boy. As if they were acting a play upon a stage, and adorned him with a counterfeit face. They also put on him the sacred garments, and upon every occasion instructed him what he was to do. This horrid piece of wickedness was sport and pastime with them, but occasioned the other priests, who at a distance saw their law made a jest of, or they were making fun of it, to shed tears and sorely lament for the dissolution of such sacred dignity. Now see the other priests standing in the background? See, Flavius Josephus was a priest himself, but he was a warrior priest. Flavius Josephus had a band of men that ran with him, and he carried a sword, and he fought the Romans. Okay? So these other guys who were standing in the background, who just standing back there crying, I have to do some more research to find out why they're just standing back there with their hands twiddling their thumbs and not getting busy in this matter. Because Flavius Josephus himself carried a sword, and he had no problem getting busy with the Romans. He had no problem fighting to defend his city. Okay, and he came into Roman captivity, and they made him a historian and changed his name. The Flavians made him a Flavian. Okay, that's how they, like the same thing they did to him is what they did to us. When you're owned, whatever family owns you, whatever family has you, your honor at their behest, they change your name. So he became a Flavian. That's how he got Flavius Josephus. But he was Josephus. You look into his history and his story, you'll see that he was Josephus prior to him being a Flavian. But that's how that falls. Okay. All right. So family, let's see here. So anyway, what we have going on is that let's see, this horrid piece of wickedness, but occasioned the other priests, who at a distance saw their law made jest of, to shed tears and sorely lament for the dissolution of such a sacred dignity. Now we're in 9. And now the people could no longer bear the insolence of this procedure. Of course they couldn't bear the insolence of this procedure, but did altogether run zealously in order to overthrow that tyranny. Now the people have got themselves together. Now they're ready to do some battle. Now they're a little bit angry about what's going on, and they're about to go up here, and they're ready to overthrow John and his robbers. And indeed, they were Gorion, Gorion, the son of Josephus, and Simeon, the son of Gamaliel, who encouraged them by going up and down when they were assembled together in crowds, as they saw them alone, to bear no longer, but to inflict punishment upon these pests and plagues of their freedom, and to purge the temple of these bloody polluters of it. Okay, again, see, they're up in the temple now. Whenever they catch them running around the streets by themselves, they run on them. They're starting to run on them now. They're starting to catch them by themselves, and these guys are realizing that they can't be out by themselves because they're getting caught and they're getting beaten, maybe even killed. The best esteemed also of the high priests, Jesus, the son of Gamaliel, and Ananus, the son of Ananus, when they were at their assemblies, bitterly reproached the people for their sloth, and excited them against the zealots. So they came against them, telling them, "Look, it's your reason for being so slow. Now you want to do something. When this thing first started happening, that was the time to get it. It wouldn't have got this bad if we had got it then." So now they're slamming the people for them, taking their time, and now that everything is out of control because they're in the temple now. They got the temple under control. They got the temple on lock. You can't even go in there and do what you're supposed to do in the temple. They got the temple on lock because all of the robbers and the thieves and the zealots are up in the temple, right? For that was the name they went by, the zealots, right? As if they were zealous in good undertakings, and were not rather zealous in the worst actions, and extravagant in them beyond the example of others. 10. And now when the multitude were gotten together to an assembly, and every one was an indignation at these men seizing upon the sanctuary. Okay, so now everybody's mad. They're in indignation, and everyone was in indignation at these men seizing the sanctuary, at their rapine and murders, but had not yet begun their attacks upon them. So everybody's angry about it, but they haven't started fighting them yet. The reason of this, which was this, that they imagined it to be a difficult thing to suppress these zealots, as indeed the case was. Ananus stood in the midst of them, and casting his eyes frequently at the temple, and having a flood of tears in his eyes, he said, Certainly it had been a good thing for me to die before I had seen the house of God full of so many abominations, or these sacred places that ought not be trodden upon at random, filled with the feet of these blood-shedding villains. Yet do I, who am clothed with the vestments of the high priesthood, and am called by that most venerable name of high priest, still live, and am but too fond of living, and cannot endure to undergo a death, which would be the glory of my old age. Okay, so he's like, I'm an old man now. I want to live. I don't want to die fighting. That's a young man's game. I'm a high priest. And I shouldn't have to be just a old man as a high priest having to fight for the temples now. It would have been better for me to do this as a young man and die. He said, I'm an old man now and I'm fond of living. But if I have to go out swinging, I'm gonna have to go out swinging, is what he's saying. And if I were the only person concerned, and as it were in a desert, I would give up my life, and that alone for God's sake. For to what purpose is it to live among a people insensible of their calamities, and where there is no notion remaining of any remedy for the miseries that are upon them? For when you are seized upon, you bear it, and when you are beaten, you are silent, and when the people are murdered, nobody dares so much as send out a groan openly. O bitter tyranny that we're under! Why do I complain? Why do I complain of these tyrants? Was it not you and your sufferance of them that have nourished them? You sufferance. You allowed it. You took so long to even deal with it. Didn't you allow this to grow? You nourished this. You fed this. Was it not you that overlooked those that first of all got together? Because there was only a few of them in the beginning. The whole city could have came and took them out, But it was because it was only a few of them. And now, they came into the city, and everybody who was wicked in the city has now become a part of this group. Was it not you that overlooked those that first that first of all got together? For they were then but a few, and by your silence made them grow to be many, and by conniving at them when they took arms, in effect armed them against yourselves. You ought to have then prevented their first attempts when they fell a reproaching your relations. But by neglecting that care in time, you have encouraged these wretches to plunder men whose houses were pillaged. Nobody said a word, which was the occasion why they carried off the owners of those houses. And when they were drawn through the midst of the city, nobody came to their assistance. And that's what happened. They took all the high priests and all the men of high effect in the city, the chief politicians, drug them through the city. Nobody said a word. That was in the first chapter up there, okay? And then they proceeded to put those of whom you have betrayed into their hands into bonds. I do not say how many, and of what character those men were whom they thus served, but certainly they were such as were accursed by none, and condemned by none, accused by none. I'm sorry. Okay, so let me say that again. I do not say how many and of what characters those men were whom they thus served, but certainly they were such as were accused by none and condemned by none. So nobody had ever said that man did anything or that man did anything, and they drug him through the streets. They put him in bonds. They put him they locked him up, and then John came through, and then they killed him because they knew that these men could call families, and they would come and put everything they're doing, shut it down. They could call families. But here come the families now, and that's what he's saying. These families, why'd you guys take so long? You could have did this in the very beginning, okay? And now everybody's crying, let's do something. The whole crowd is crying, let's do something. But you could have did something in the very beginning, is the way he's putting it. So we have seen this also, so that still the best of the herd of brute animals, as it were, have been still led to be sacrificed, when yet nobody said a word or moved his right hand for their preservation. Will you bear, therefore? Will you bear to see your sanctuary trampled on? And will you lay steps for these profane wretches, which they have? And will you lay steps for these profane wretches, upon which they may mount to higher degrees of insolence? Okay, are you going to allow them to continue, and they're just going to get, more and more heinous in their crimes? Higher degrees of insolence, more heinous in their crime. Will you not pluck them down from their exaltation? For even by this time they had proceeded to higher enormities, if they had been able to overthrow anything greater than a sanctuary. They have seized upon the strongest place of the whole city. You may call it a temple if you please, though it be like a citadel or a fortress. And that's what he's saying. They've got the strongest place in the city now. You can call it a temple if you want to, but it's a fortress. It's a citadel. It's a fortress, right? And that's exactly what it was for the Jebusites. It was a fortress when David took it. It was a fort. David took it and turned it into the temple, and I mean, it's a fort and still a fort, a garrison, but he put the temple in it because the walls are so thick. I mean, if you look at this, you can see how thick those walls are. If you just look down the left-hand side of this building, you can see the two temple gates in the front. You got a column on the left and a column on the right. You look at that column on the right and go look at that column on the left and go all the way out to the corner, and then look from that corner all the way back to the other corner. You can see how wide that wall is. That wall is that wide all the way around. Now, the brothers who go over to the land every year for all the feasts and the whole nine, they'll tell you. They've got pictures out on the internet. One of them is a friend of mine, Ashira. Some of you guys know him as Freedom. He's been there. He's taking pictures. Matter of fact, they're in the land now. And when you see them walking around the city, those walls are thick. Those walls are thick. Those are huge, thick walls. And so when Titus came, he had to figure out how he was going to get into that area. He didn't want, because the walls around Jerusalem were thick anyway, and there were multiple walls. There was an outer wall and a couple of inner walls. So coming into Jerusalem was not going to be easy because it was highly fortified. And that's the thing, the city was a fortress. It was a Jebusite fortress at first when David took it, and then David fortified it even more. Okay, and so that's the thing they're talking about here. Okay, now they've seized upon the strongest place of the whole city. You may call it a temple if you please, though it be like a citadel or a fortress. Now, while you have tyranny in so great a degree walled in, and see your enemies over your heads, to what purpose is it to take counsel? And what have you to support your minds withal? Perhaps you wait for the Romans, that they may protect our holy places. Are our matters even brought to that pass?